So I'm really appreciative that I'm here at this gallery. It's just fabulous. And as quilters and artists, it's such a great venue, and I'm glad you guys have visited it. So we'll start with about me. I grew up in New Jersey. When I was in college, my parents moved to Western Pennsylvania. And back in those dark ages, you went home in the summer, and I ended up staying there for the rest of my life. So I'm a farm girl, and I'm pretty down to earth. I was raised with a lot of structure, a lot of rules, and I was supposed to obey those rules. And so what did I do as an adult? I became an accountant. What a bunch of rules there are there. And to boot, I was an enrolled agent, so I followed IRS code for my lifetime. Yeah. Anyhow, so why did I choose textiles to pursue my art in my aged years? I've sewn since I was 8 years old. I was a 4-H leader for over 30 years, teaching clothing, basic sewing, and tailoring. So I come from that tradition and patterning, but I got tired of all the rules. I wanted to rebel. So in the mid-90s, I discovered Nancy Crow. And the way I discovered her was in a fabric store. And there was a line of fabric in 2 colorways. And I went, I said, whose is this? This is awesome. After all those calicos that we had to deal with, it was abstract, it was colorful. So I went and read the selvage, and it said, Nancy Crow for Kent Avery. And I thought, what is this? So I bought the fabric, and you know what I made? Because we were all wearing them in the 90s? A vest. So I had a Nancy Crow fabric with my vest. And then, you know, kind of was like, man, that lady was cool. And then about 5 years later, there was a quilt show at a college close to where I live. So I drove, it was at Indiana University of Pennsylvania in Indiana, Pennsylvania. And so I went there and I looked at her work and I thought, oh my goodness, her seams didn't match. You know, as a clothing construction person, your seams match. And so I thought, and she's using all different shades of reds and greens. What is up with this? And I left very perplexed. And I thought, you know, she's breaking all these rules. And she stirred around in my mind. And then in the early 20s, she had another show at Carnegie Mellon University. And that's the other direction. So I drove there and went to see her show. And of course, nothing matched. She was still hand quilting. By that time, we were using machines, computerized machines, and doing machine quilting on the machine. And I thought, there's something about this woman. I said, she was like a forerunner in the quilt world. She broke the rules. She brought her art background into her quilt making. You know, even though her seams didn't meet, it brought such an element of surprise, of just movement, and it was so interesting to me. She never left my mind. But it was not till 2011, because I'm kind of a chicken and an introvert. So it wasn't until 2011 that I finally went and took a class from her at her barn. And I took strip piecing 1. And you know, I can sew. So every assignment she gave me, I got everything done, all 26 sets of all this fabric. And then on the next to the last day, she said, now we're going to cut these apart. And we're going to put them together, and here are your options. You can do a column quilt, you can do a 4-plex, you know. I froze. I had no idea what to do with all this stuff I had sewn together. So I kind of left feeling a failure. I was never, ever going back to that place. But you know what? The next year, I went and took the same class over. Thank goodness Nancy didn't remember me. I was like a newbie, you know. Good. I don't remember a lot what I did in that class or what I came home with, but I must have learned something and was still intrigued, because the next year I went back. I took 2 weeks off work and I took strip piecing 1 again, and the bonus week of strip piecing 2. And in strip piecing 1, Nancy looked at me and she said, "You've been here before. I expect big stuff from you." And I was like, yikes, uh-oh, the gauntlet has been drawn. So as I finished all my little strips, I thought, what am I going to do with it? And I kind of went up to her and I said, "Can I cut these any way I want?" And she said, "Yeah, you can. Do whatever you want." So what did I do? I cut on the diagonal. And that week, line study was born. And the second week, we did a whole nother grouping of assignments, and I came up with my curb series in the second week. So here we had a win-win. I went home with 2 ideas. What a relief, finally. I didn't go home feeling like a failure. So I love to sew, and I found out that I love to cut apart what I sew. I love to cut it apart. I design on a wall. I put all these parts and pieces on a wall and rearrange them and engineer them into a wall quilt. I don't cut using a ruler or a scissor. I use a rotary cutter. And now, since I've been rotary cutting, since 2011, I can cut a straight line without a ruler. So now I put the ruler in my left hand to cut. And so far, I still can cut wonky with that because I like the wonkiness. I like that it's discordant, unharmonious. It gives you some vertigo when you look at it, jazzy. Another thing I enjoy, and I've learned from Nancy, is to pick a palette. And I do that before I start a piece. I look at the lightness and darkness of my fabric and not the color itself. And that's why you'll see perhaps a couple colors together. You say, why did she do that? And it's because it's the light or the dark of it. And neutrals play an important part in my work. I consider the blacks and the whites, the grays and the browns to be my workhorses. They pull together my work and kind of slow down that exuberance that my work has. I cannot imagine what these pieces would look like if they were just color, and crazy. So you can see behind me, line study 6 and 7. I decided to study the neutrals pretty quick in my practice and just put thin lines of color. And I was very careful that they were crooked lines, that when I joined them, there was no way they were going to meet and become a continuous line. I wanted that uneven brokenness flow of the line. And in line study 11, back there by the videographer, it just shows a blatant disregard for lining up anything. And the resulting piece is a skewed playing field that can give you a bit of vertigo. But as your eye finds a neutral, your eye will slow down. It'll bounce around and then find a neutral and it'll slow down. And that quilt reminds me of a magic carpet. I can just see Aladdin out there riding through the sky on that. We'll move now to my curb appeals. And, Nancy said to make something fresh and exciting and energetic. And I thought, how can I do that? And one of our assignments in that class must have been to make a graphic insert or something, because that's when I said, well, what's graphic? And I went and Googled it, when I could get to the internet. What does graphic mean? And I came up with black and white. I thought that can be graphic. Curb Appeal 1, I have Curb Appeal 2 behind me here, but Curb Appeal 1 is in a box at home. It's never been finished. I don't finish my classwork. In fact, when we do the critique in class, I have been known with a magic marker to draw on my quilt and point arrows to it and say, this is good, not so good, because I do not want to finish that work and show it publicly, because it was done with her guidance, and input, because she'll come down and say, take that off the wall, you start over. And you kind of do. This series my first three or four, 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all called graphic, but I renamed them to Curb Appeal because when I finally left doing straight up and down inserts, the vertical inserts in Curb Appeal 5, and this one hung in the Moldavian embassy for 3 years because the ambassador was from Pennsylvania and he chose Pennsylvania artists, which I thought was pretty cool because there were a bunch of us. When the truck came to pick up my work, it was just full of Pennsylvania artwork. So that was pretty cool. And so I moved on to Curb Appeal 6, and you can see where I have the vertical, but I added the horizontal. And all of a sudden, I thought, these look like neighborhoods. This looks like housing developments. And you know, I grew up in the country, so that was pretty interesting to me. I've never lived really next to anybody, a lot of people. And here you have the generic housing, you know, the boring stuff, but here you have a couple jazzy houses. And I started asking myself, where would I want to live? And I kept doing my curb appeals, and there's several in between 6 and 17 that's over here. And I made 17 and 18 and 19 in quick succession. I was really jazzed about, I still was in love with the graphic nature of the work. In Curb Appeal 17, I like that I played with the white and the black in the center and the edges of the quilt, all those different ways of arranging parking spaces or parking lots. Those are my awful parking sections. I enjoyed that one a lot and the wonkiness of it. And into 18 is back here. I played again with the juxtaposition of the white and the black being against each other. But my color palette I chose, it was an early morning sunrise in Western Pennsylvania. It was so surprising because it had green hues in it and aqua and salmon colors. It reminded me more of a beach sunrise than a mountain sunrise. And I really haven't seen that shades again. Maybe because I'm not walking at 5 o'clock in the morning anymore. But then here at Curb 19, I was really jazzed when I did this one. When I did my white and black, the white is more predominant and has a black chunky lines in it. And I really enjoyed that. It reminds me of piano keys, this one. Curb 24 is behind this quilt right there. And it was a time when I said to myself, you need to take a breather, you need to slow down, you need to tame down your color palette and not use so much black and white. So the result is a quieter piece, but still fun. And Curb 35 is getting near the end of my Curb Appeal series. I haven't done much since this one, but you can see that I lost the black and white, and I went more back to my neutrals. And then I started doing these black and dark fabric piecing, which I thought, new ideas perking in my mind. So where did those critters come from? You know, 6 or 7 years ago, it started getting a little warmer. And in the winter, our ground wasn't freezing as deep as it usually did. And that spring, when I went out to the dirt and dug in it, there were these weird bugs. I had never seen them. They had glowy eyes. They had big wings that were like iridescent. I don't know what they were. I haven't seen them since, so maybe they went away. But I drew out these critters, and they're very different. They're not strip piece like my other work. There's 4 pattern sections to it, and I would just rearrange them. And sometimes they're all together as one, and sometimes just have fun with it and rearrange them. And the same with that one over there. And you can notice that my color palette's a little different. During that time, I was studying Stuart Davis, and he very much influenced my color at that point, and the big chunky sections that he put his work out in. So if you don't know his work, I invite you to look into it. Right now I have 10 critters done in the series, and there's 10 more that are not quilted, and probably I never will quilt them. So what was going on in my studio between 2020 and 2025? You know, I was busy in the studio. It was during a little bit of a lockdown, and I went back to strip piecing, and I created a new series, Polyphony, which is full of the repetition and rhythm. And then I looked at my studio and I said, I have all this leftover parts from everything. And I thought, I need to use them. So I started a series, and I call it Vocabulary. And it's just, I put together different parts to see if I could come up with new quilts. And I did. Some are successful, some not so successful. And lately, though, my focus has been on surface design, using thickened dyes, screens, monoprinting, and direct marking. I have found new interest in mark making, and I'm surprised and fascinated with what comes out of my mind and through my hand. I am not a drawer. I cannot make anything look like it really does. So I'm not going to do representational art because I can't do it. It just doesn't work. Maybe with years of practice it would, but I don't have years left. So I just do my crazy marks. And during the summer month of August 2024, I explored the application of earth pigments on fabric. And this year I created over 30 pieces since January till now, created 30 pieces with my earth pigment fabric because I just go crazy. And you know, I think I had 100 yards of fabric that I had done earth pigments on. And the 5 small pieces that are near the elevator are from part of my earth pigments. You can see that the flavor of them is definitely different. I have shifted from exuberant to quiet and reflective, peaceful. But for now, don't think I'm done with my exuberant piecing. I'm probably going to go back to it. And for me as a quilter, there is only one way to make successful art, and that is to have an intimate conversation with my fabric, my rotary cutter, and my sewing machine. For in the tactile comfort of my cloth, the roll of my cutter, and the hum of my sewing machine, I fall under the spell of the needle and thread. I allow the fabric to transform itself into a playful, sometimes quiet narrative that may or may not be the result of my conscious and unconscious thoughts. Thank you.